How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Cyber Clinic Central podcast. I'm your host, George, and today we have another special guest lined up. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Angel, I'm the junior member coordinator / system administrator and a system engineer. I got a lot of roles.
And I'm excited to get into all of them today. I'm excited to learn your path into cyber, the different hats you've worn, because you definitely worn a lot of hats in your very young career.
For sure. Yeah.
So, brief background on Angel. Angel is one of the founders, actually, of the Cyber Clinic. Formerly Free Cyber Clinic, now just Cyber Clinic. And, by the time next episode, who knows? Might be even bigger by then.
All right. National?
Can't wait. That's in store. I'm going to address the elephant in the room. Where's Mehdi? Yet again. I'm going to keep addressing this until he comes back. Mehdi's a busy man. I think I've said this before. I know this. Angel knows this. He also is a man of a lot of hats, and he's going to get back on this podcast. He was supposed to be here today, but we're going to get him on the next one to get some more content for you guys. But today's about you, Angel.
Cool.
Kind of want to get into your story with cyber, even before, now, when you were young, getting into the field. If this was your first field, kind of starts from that, then going into the Cyber Clinic, your experience, how'd you get started with that in college, and now what you're doing now, what's next. And I know after we talk about your story, you want to get into a special topic, which I'm super excited about. So we'll get into that in the second half of the podcast. But let's kick it off, man, from the beginning. Let me know where you started. How'd this all start for you?
Man, so I always like to tinker with computers. That's just been the thing since forever.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first time I was like, all right, cool. I think I'm hacking, doing things of cybersecurity, such was back in the Call of Duty days.
Okay.
So clans, when FaZe was a big thing, right? There's the other side to it. There's the hacking community. So
I didn't even know that.
Dude, there's mod menus, aimbot, all the cool stuff. So I was like, this is kind of cool. How can I do this, right?
Right.
So I started messing around, and I would ask people, be like, yo, level me up, level up my account, please. Mm-hmm. And they'd be like, yeah, man, sure, whatever. Here.
Right.
And then slowly, I found a couple communities, I found a couple Facebook pages, and they were like, hey, we do hacking and we charge for a service. I was like, okay, well, let's see what that means, right?
This is, how long ago was this?
This was back when I was in middle school, so this
is before all the ransomware as a service and all the stuff we got going now.
Oh, it's actually, I think it's near that age.
Okay.
So I want to say this is 5-6 years before the WannaCry, I think, came out. Okay. So we're getting to that stage, right? So malware as a service, it was actually on the come up. I was actually a victim myself. So there was this thing, they were like, hey, we'll give you basically a botnet, so you can do DDoS attacks. Oh. And I was like, man, I'll do it, right? Because
just try it out.
Because in my case, I was like, oh, it's legal, right? It's totally legal, right? So I tried to buy one, and then I messaged them, and they're like, yeah, I'm setting up the account. I'm setting it up. 3 months later, never got my account.
Never. Ooh.
Right? And it was $80. But lesson learned. Honestly, it was probably a good thing I never got that. I probably would have committed some illegal crimes, right?
Ignorance is not a not a bliss in this case.
Yeah, in those cases, it was very much. It was the target was the kids. I was the kid, right? Because we're all like, oh, we want to be hackers, right? Because at that time, everyone's anonymous. Lizard Squad was a huge thing back then too. So it was around that time when everything was kicking off, and I was like, "Oh, this seems cool. I could be a part of this, right?"
Right.
Ethically, right?
Ethically.
We must emphasize that. But then I was all right. This is cool. Then I got into the community. I was talking through the Facebook page. I met a couple of the people that made tools. They taught me basically how to make RTM tools. Right. Essentially, they're remote management tools. So you would inject yourself onto the program, specifically, let's say Call of Duty Black Ops 2. You inject yourself into it, and then you could get mod menus. If you're playing zombies, you would get points, in the game or whatever, right? And I was like, this is cool. How do you do that? So I looked up a couple YouTube tutorials how to make your first mod menu. It's like, oh, here's how you make a configuration file for this. Here's how you use C# to, create this, right?
Right.
How do you connect from, A to B? And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool.
So it kind of just started going down the rabbit hole of all the different technologies and tech stacks, huh?
Yeah. Keep in mind, though, I was in middle school, so me coding in C#, I didn't know anything I was doing, right? I was coding blind, all right? But it was pretty cool, because I was like, yo, look at this. It was if just imagine the first time you open up your first code editor, right? All the code, and you're like, oh, this is so cool, right? And you build your first thing, right? You do a hello world.
Hello world.
yeah. And then you would change and be like, oh, by Angel, or by George, right? And I think that was the kickoff. Because from there, I jailbroke my PlayStation 3. I was connecting, making RTM tools. Well, in a script kiddie way, I was, following tutorials. But I think that really set off the stage for the rest of my career. Because my teacher in middle school was like, hey, you should learn coding.
Right.
We have this IT class. IT, it used to be multimedia, so we would record stuff like this.
Okay.
And
So you're used to stuff like this then.
yeah. I mean, in the Call of Duty days, I was a video editor too.
Oh, okay.
So I was doing, the montages, the transition stuff.
Yeah.
I used to do that, like with Sony Vegas, but that time has passed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that was that was the kickoff, because from there, coding. I went to high school. It was a technical school. They're like, oh, we do IT, and I was like, oh, IT.
Mm-hmm.
I love this stuff, like networking. I get to learn more of what I just learned from like the remote tools, right? So I went into that, and I was like, oh, being a network engineer was a thing. That was a hot thing before being like a hacker, cybersecurity engineer, because then it wasn't such a big thing. I think before it was more so information security,
Right.
information assurance.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think I mentioned this on a couple podcast episodes. A lot of people that are in cyber right now, they were network engineers. They were network engineers for like X amount of years, and then either they just got thrown into the role, or they automatically got transitioned to the role because there's so much overlap.
No, exactly, yeah. And it actually plays. I think that's the thing that I think it's changed with right now, is that everyone's like, oh, let's just jump straight into cyber, right? Which honestly, not a bad idea, but it's having those ideas. Like, you'll see the best people in cybersecurity have like the IT fundamentals, or had some sort of IT role as their background before. And I think those are the ones who really launch into cyber like really well. Like in your case, you're a system programmer, right?
Yeah.
So you got that coding, you got the application side ready to go. So the moment you hop into like a cybersecurity engineering role, you'll be like, well, actually, I understand how development works.
Yeah.
Right? You got all that insight. But yeah, I would say from there, I learned networking. Honestly, I didn't learn jack. I was like, oh, this seems really cool. Here's subnetting. I think that's the one thing that stuck with me. And outside of that, I was like, this is how like internet works. Like that, I think that's the general gist that I learned out of that.
Right.
Oh, and around the time I was building computers too.
And this was all middle school to high school, correct?
Yeah, that computer part, like the computer building, that was high school. In middle school, I didn't have the budget.
Gotcha.
I was like,
completely understand that.
Yeah, I was like, I upgraded a RAM stick and it was wrong. I put ECC RAM instead of non-ECC, but that's a whole different story.
That's a story for another day. So middle school, started tinkering around with the Call of Duty lobbies, started getting involved with different communities, making your own tools. High school, starting to get more hands-on, formal with the classes and doing things. Talk about into college, because I know going into college, you had a lot of involvement with not just Cyber Clinic, but other organizations too. So kind of talk us through those early years in college too.
So funny enough, in high school, I was like, I heard about DEF CON. And I was like, oh, dude, I gotta go. So actually, in my high school, I actually went to my first DEF CON.
That's awesome.
So I was like, oh, this is cool. I honestly thought I was gonna get let in, because I was like, oh, it's only for like 18 plus, right?
Right.
Something crazy goes down there. No, they let kids in, as long as like, you're kind of professional about it. Don't be like, just don't be weird.
Just don't be a kiddie about it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it was amazing. Honestly, there was a lot. It was like information overload, because I saw like satellite hacking. I saw cars, they're breaking into like, at that time it was like messing around with radio frequencies, hack RFs.
Yeah.
Like how to break into a car with like, the key fobs and stuff, right? And I was like, oh, this is so cool, right? All over my head, honestly. From there, I was like, let me see what the next steps is, because I was actually going to go to University of Nevada, Reno, right? Our rival per se. Right? No,
you're here to hear first, folks.
No. Honestly, everyone from Reno is pretty cool. I actually got to visit it back in high school, and I was like, oh, I might end up going here. Then I was like, yeah, the budget's not big enough for Reno. Yeah, you gotta do housing. So
Everything,
I was like, let's just do Las Vegas. And I looked into the cybersecurity clubs, because at that time there was one club in high school. Yeah, it died after like 4 weeks. So I was like, how can I like really stay in this in university level? I hit up Layer Zero. If you got, for any of the Layer Zero officers, or leadership of Layer Zero ever looks at the email, you'll see my email in 2019 when I was like, hey, I want to be part of your guys' like teams. Are you guys gonna compete in DEF CON CTF?
Yeah.
So honestly, that was a big ask, because once I joined, I was like, oh, yo, we're not at the level yet. We're doing NCO, like we're still kind of like getting our roots and stuff like that. So I was like, hey, they had a web development position open at Layer Zero, and I was like, let's do it. I don't know how to code.
Just hop right in, yeah.
And that was a start. From there, I started doing training for, I started doing workshops, teaching people about Wireshark, everything that I knew, just reciprocating back, right?
That's awesome.
And I think that's where it really kicked off. We started a cyber clinic, right?
And that kind of transitioned right through, because you were kind of doing what you're doing in Layer Zero and the cyber clinic, and the cyber clinic, we take people from all walks of
Yeah.
of education. So the training even amplified more because now you're training people who aren't coming from like a background like you did, or even like I did, who came from a technical background. They're coming from business, marketing.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
don't, they know of technology, but do they know the technology?
No, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that was a huge thing, right? Actually, that was probably the biggest reason I got into the clinic because I was like, yo, I get to do everything I did in Layer Zero and possibly get paid for this, right? And make this my career. And I was like, dude, why not? I mean, I already do this for Layer Zero. Why not do it for the clinic, right?
Right.
And that was my first role, right? I was the training program developer, whatever role we ended up calling it, right?
Yeah. It's got a lot of our roles have gone through a lot of growth over time.
No, for sure. And I was like, send it. And then, we had our other training program developer, which was Colton. And I think from there, I think just have everyone kind of just fell into their spot in the clinic. And I think that's ultimately what led us to today.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I was like, oh, I love teaching people. You guys were like, oh, we love leading people, right? So I was like, boom, that's the perfect dynamic, right?
Put it together, yeah. I kind of talk me through your transition because you started off training program and you still are training. Let's get that straight. Angel is still training people in the clinic day by day. He's just not officially. It's just not officially there. But then you transitioned into your junior member. So kind of talk about the junior member program, what you do there, and kind of like because it ultimately that program is a training program in itself.
Yeah.
So kind of talk us through that because I think that's me and Mehdi have mentioned it because we've talked about Gen Cyber and stuff like that. But we kind of want to hear it from your perspective as like the person. The person leading it.
Yeah, I mean, the junior member program is like you mentioned, basically a training program, but even earlier on, right? The reason, honestly, the biggest reason I joined this because I was like, I'm already part of Gen Cyber. I already led that portion, at least before. I was like, well, why not just put it together, right? Like, I'm gonna still teach them, but now I get to teach them year long, right? What I teach them in a week, I can teach them like the whole year. So, biggest initiative for that was also. Back in high school, I was like, oh, I want to do like all this stuff, but I didn't have a mentor. Right. At best, I had my program teacher, which was like, here's some stuff. I'm really good at networking, and that was kind of his scope. I did my first ETF I think my senior year, and that was pretty fun, but I didn't learn a lot from that. So I was like, I want to be able to give back what I wish I could have had in high school.
Right.
That was probably the biggest part. And then from there, I mean, just if you knew Dr. Kim, you're gonna get involved in everything else. And then I was like, you know what? Let me be a part of the junior coordinator program, and basically teach them really young. Basically, the moment that they hit university, they're as good as me, or if not better, right?
Right.
Ideally better.
And you've done an amazing job. There's kids who come into the university level and not even 18 yet, holding multiple certifications. Industry recognized certifications, or even one of the junior members at one time had her own CVE, which is
actually multiple.
Insane, multiple, right? So it's like the coming in at such a young age with so much experience. It's very, very bright for the future of cyber because now one of the big criticisms is like, well, where do we get the experience, right? There's so many jobs, and there's a big misconception. There's a lot of jobs, but a lot of these jobs require like X amount of experience. There's not a lot of entry-level jobs. Yeah. They require this amount of experience. So how do we start training to get that experience early on, starting it so young and like 14, freshman year in high school, sophomore year in high school, even if it's just a little bit of training or just exposure to the fact before you even get to college, can really leave so much, really does so much for the member.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
I'll shout out Dr. Manson for this one. It's kind of like sports, right? Because a lot of let's take professional athletes for example, like basketball or football. These people are playing basketball or football since kids, basically. Kids, or even at the younger age is like middle school, high school, and they're playing all the way through, and they're getting to that pro level. Why not take that same approach with education in certain disciplines, like cyber, for example, where experience is such a desirable thing and needed thing. Start them off young, and then they get that. There's a number, I think he quoted, of like 10,000 hours of experience.
Yeah.
And then if you start them earlier, by the time they finish a degree, start them freshman year, that's 4 years. Average college degree in America is five and a half to be honest. 5 to 6 to be honest with you for a bachelor's. So by that time they have about 10 years, and if they get out early, 8 years of experience. By the time they get to the workforce, how many certifications, how much experience can you acquire in that time span?
No, exactly, right?
It's crazy.
And I think that's the biggest thing that we emphasize to the students, right? It's like, look, if I was in your shoes right now, I'd be like doing everything you're doing, if not more, because we realized later on, we're like, oh, dude, I wish I did like all this back when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Because now you got more stuff, you might have to pay bills, things like that, right? And then the biggest issue is the time, right?
Yeah.
In high school, you got a lot more time, right? Well, for most, I'm not gonna say all, but
yeah,
I would say most have a good chunk of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, they can go study for OSAP, right? They can go get into bug bounty really early on, right? Basically, make those mistakes early on instead of having to, figure that stuff out at university level when you have to go finish some compiler's program, right? or whatever, right?
Yeah, but things definitely do ramp up. Hopefully in the near future they'll have cyber degrees, interdisciplinary cyber degrees. That's ultimately cyber is interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be great. But you kind of hit on it already. I want to get into the special topic of today, Angel. I want to hear what I'm very curious.
Yeah.
I was excited when you told me what you want to talk about, to be honest, because this is something I'm genuinely interested in too, and I'm curious about. So, lay it on me.
All right. So you want to get your first bug, right? Honestly, it took me a long time.
Bugs for bug bounties, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So like web applications, vulnerability disclosure programs, specifically for web applications. It takes a lot. So, and take that also with a grain of salt. I mean a lot because you need to first figure out what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel like you're good with SQL injection, make that your strength, right? But also keep in mind SQL injection is a lot harder now because it's pretty common, right? Like, well, not so much that's common, but it's more common to find resources. You can go on what's that, Geeks for Geeks, right?
I know. For me, at least, we always refer to the OWASP top 10 and SQL injections on top of there. So
yeah.
For my other fellow developers up there, OWASP top 10. Keep it in mind when you're developing. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, what I was trying to get at is that Geeks for Geeks has examples on how to do the injection, and along with an article saying here's how to fix it.
How to protect it. Yeah.
A lot harder to get those sort of things. The biggest thing is enumeration. Like, if you can find things that other people can't, that's where you hit the gold mine. Because a lot of people hop on vulnerability disclosure programs and they're like, oh, $50,000 for like a high critical bug.
Right.
All right, let's all go for it. But they don't realize there's people that can run automated scanners for that same bug, for that critical bug.
Mm-hmm.
So if that takes away the easy wins. Now you got to get into it and maybe change certain like flags. You can't do fuzzing as easily. You can, but it's a lot easier to find the nicer bugs, the more paid bugs, by doing some manual testing. So key thing is find what other people can. Subdomain enumeration, finding information disclosure through like maybe GitHub. If they have open source projects, look at all the issues. That tells you a lot. That lets you know, hey, they have 50 issues they haven't resolved for cross-site scripting.
Mm-hmm.
That might be somewhere to take a look at.
Oh, I see. So, because since they're open source, the code's out there. You can kind of see what they're working on and what's marked as an issue.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
and then there's where you can find your exploit right there.
Exactly.
Potentially.
Well, yeah, potentially. Yeah. And that brings up another thing, right? Just because you find something doesn't mean you should actually report it. Now,
what do you mean?
Now, let's hold on, right? So, what I mean by don't report it is because sometimes a low vulnerability or something with like low criticality might not be taken for value up front. Let's take, for example, I found an IP address from some company, right? Mm-hmm. And behind it, there's some admin page. Well, it turns out you need a VPN file to access that. Well, okay. Information disclosure, but they can't even access it if you don't have the VPN. But what if later on you find a VPN file leaked somewhere out there?
Right.
You have now this information you never, disclosed, and you have the VPN, you combine that together, and now you have access to the internal network.
I see.
So it's combining those things that you find to ultimately get bigger impact, right? Because the thing is, you submit one thing, it's not really going to matter. I always say it's best to send it out, and if they don't fix it, well, that's a win for you, right? Because then you can keep that information for later. But yeah, it's honestly, the biggest thing is finding places where other people don't look. So the subdomains, don't, if someone can run let's say Nmap, right? Or some like Dirtbuster, and they can find a subdomain super easily, don't start there.
Right.
That's not the place to start at because everyone else has already looked there. Look for those subdomains that maybe got leaked through a demo from a developer, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they were let's say Microsoft was like, hey, we're doing a demo on our new web application, and when they're doing their demo, you happen to see the subdomain on the call, right?
Yeah, right.
Or the stream. Take note of that, right? with responsibility, right? Assuming they allow you to touch that.
Ethical.
Yeah. And that gets into like scope and rules of engagement, right? As you look into these things, try to leverage what's called that scope/rules of engagement, because they'll tell you like, hey, you can look for anything that's star.google.com.
Mm-hmm.
So that means anything that's subdomain google.com. There's a lot that you can find.
Mm-hmm.
You can find subdomains. If you find one subdomain, check for even more subdomains behind the subdomain, right?
Okay.
And that's gonna for me, and like you can reference this YouTuber called Nahamsek, talks about how to find different sort of things just from the enumeration and reconnaissance stage. But a better example is I forget his name, but something JH. But if you look him up, basically he has a course called like bug bounty certified, like bug bounty course, something like that. And he goes all over how to find every single little detail.
So it's a lot of an earlier stage of it. So it's a lot of the OSINTing, the enumeration, the scanning. Mm-hmm. A lot on the earlier stage of the hack is going on for bug bounty.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, don't go for the big targets.
That's what I was just going to ask about, because I feel like, a lot of people get like glazed eyes when they go into a bug bounty program, and they'll see like those big numbers you mentioned, like 50,000, 100,000. And at the same time, like you're thinking like everyone's seeing that.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone's trying to go for the 50,000, and if they're offering that much money for a bug in their program, one, it's twofold, right? I feel like it's twofold. One, obviously they don't want anybody. They want to fix their stuff as much as possible. Two, they're confident in their application or their system that you're not going to find that bug bounty. Because if you weren't that confident and you know people are going to find stuff, I don't know if you want to be offering 50,000 for every bug.
No, exactly, right? Which gets to the next point. When you're first starting off bug bounty, start off with the ones that are free, where you're not going to get payout. Because the big idea is that get your first bug so you get an idea of how to get a bug. Once you go from there, I think it's a lot easier to be like, oh, if this is something that exists and this is something I can report, that will give me a valid submission. Because, by the way, you can get informational or basically, you can, let's say you submit a bug and let's say it got you server-side, like request forgery, something like that, right? Cool, that's pretty critical. But if you can't show a proof of concept or show how that's impactful to the company, they're going to be like, cool, have a nice day, bro, informational disclosure. Or sorry, informational. Which means basically no. Nah. You get like, thanks for looking.
Yeah.
Instead of
good job.
Essentially, right? So look for those ones where they'll give you $1 or just a thank you letter. Because who knows, maybe that lands you a role too.
Right.
That's another thing. There's been people, take for example, Kevin, right? Mm-hmm. He landed his role, with Okta because he was doing bug bounty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if you want to get into like application security, doing bug bounty is always a good way to get into a company, because if they're like, yo, this guy's getting a lot of bugs, I think it'd be cheaper to just get him the job instead of
secure our stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. So maybe that could be your one way, right? Get into private programs. So this can start from doing platforms like HackerOne has a like HO1 CTF. If you finish a couple challenges, like 10 or so, you get invited to private programs.
Okay.
Which means a lot less people poking at those, certain websites. So boom, that's another way in. Also, connections. Networking isn't limited.
Because before you get into that, I'm sure you could meet a lot of people in the bug bounty community who are trying to do the same thing as you. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's a lot of cooperation going on behind the scenes. And like, if there's money involved, just split it, right?
That's the thing. That's the really cool thing about like the whole cybersecurity communities is that sometimes they're just like, bro, let me help you out because I was in that place one time.
Okay.
Yeah, or you might sometimes, for example, companies will hold events. Let's say near DEF CON time, Hacker Week. Mm-hmm. They'll be like, hey, T-Mobile wants to test out our new product, or like T-Mobile wants to test out the new product. Pull up to our event at Flamingo. We got this room. We got food. Hack at it. And they'll invite you if you're connected well. So if you've been doing well on HackerOne, they might look at your profile, pull you, and be like, send you a message saying, hey, you should come to our private party /hackathon, right?
That's awesome.
And that's how you'll be able to get those big bugs. That's actually where a lot of money is made.
In the private rooms.
Exactly. Right? And yeah, that's always a really good place to start. Which, back to the networking part, right? Get that status, but also you can consider things like volunteer at like a village. Mm-hmm. Volunteer at Red Team Village, AppTech Village, the places where you basically want to land your job at, right? or be a part of a community. So AppSec Village is going to be huge. You're going to meet a lot of presenters. I was what's called a volunteer there, and I got to watch some presentations for free, right? Some of the ones that cost money. So if you want to get some knowledge, that's one way to get it. If you want to get connected, I mean, volunteer for multiple days, you'll see a lot of faces. You might even see some of the famous YouTubers, people you look up to, right?
Yeah.
And you might ask them a question, be like, hey, I've been doing bug bounty. I got a quick question for you. I feel like you might be able to help me out with this, right? And you'll be surprised how helpful everyone is there.
Yeah, I can attest to that too, because I've met some pretty famous, cybersecurity YouTubers in my time, and they're all really down to earth and really helpful, and just that you mentioned, you hit it right on the nail. Like a lot of people in the community want to bring everyone up. It's not very it's not super cutthroat.
Yeah,
it's not like they're snaking people under the table or they want to see other people fail. The community is very good, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's awesome. I didn't know it was that it was like that for the bug bounty community too.
For sure.
I didn't even know there's like their own little subsection. That's super awesome. It doesn't surprise me.
No, for sure.
But it's super awesome to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, it goes as deep as you look, to be honest. Right?
Yeah.
Like this is from what I know. There's probably, I don't know, maybe some secret organizations that like pull people because they're like, oh, they do really well in HackerOne, and they might pull you into their own programs, right? Like those private programs I was mentioning before.
Mm-hmm.
But even, I don't know, maybe something more discreet, right? So if you look for things and you do well, right, and you put yourself out there, I think you'll be able to do well, right? And I think the last point that I want to touch on is going to be hanging out with people that are smarter than you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the biggest things. Recently, I joined Pros vs. Joes back when the last CTF was.
Yeah.
And I've learned a ton, right? Honestly, I've been going in pretty blind to things. I've been learning about infrastructure as code, and I would say today I had a meeting. I was stuck there for like an hour 30 because I was like, dude, I don't know how to fix this, right? And he's like, dude, it was one simple line. I was like, that's crazy, right? So involve yourself with communities to learn even more, right? Being around smart people. So the moment you hit a wall, you have someone there to, boom, get past that wall, right? Because that's the biggest thing. If you try to solo it in this community, it's hard. It's really hard because you're not gonna know everything. If we're being realistic, just look at OWASP top 10 and tell me if you could do every single vulnerability on there, right? That's just kind of to put in perspective, right? So yeah, there's a lot in security.
That notion of hanging out with people that are smarter than you learn a lot. That's a lot of the stuff I picked up hanging around others in the clinic that are a lot more technical than I am, because my technical ability lies in more of the development side of things. So when it comes to implementing controls in the OWASP top 10, I'm completely fine with that. I could do things like that, but on the other side of things enumeration, exploitation, web exploitation are some of my weaker traits in cybersecurity. When I first started, everything was kind of weak, but I've gotten better at other stuff.
Yeah, just with time. Yeah.
Other just doing the CTFs, just participating and learning. So I completely agree with that. And I think the number one thing that echoes over everything you said is just community, and no matter what you do, from in college, getting involved with different organizations, and to your career, if you want to, depending on where you want to go, getting involved with different villages at DEF CON, and even the Bug Bounty has their own community there, and I'm sure other avenues of cyber have their own, niches and communities there too. So I think Samuel mentioned in a previous episode, but he's like, just do it, just get involved, just
that's
take the step in the door.
Yeah, I mean, you might suck at the beginning. I could tell you from experience. When I joined Pros vs. Joes, I was like, dang, I'm probably the dumbest person in this room, right? But that's the good thing, right? Because that means you have a lot more to learn from everyone in that room.
Only one way to go is up.
Exactly, right? Yeah, worst case scenario, you messed up the production servers, and that's a whole nother story.
Hey, I've been there before. I've been, very early in my career, I've taken down production servers, but I'm still here. We're still here. So before we wrap up, I kind of want to get into you a little bit, wrap it back into you. So we kind of talked about what you've done, but I want to know where you're going. So what's next for you? I know you're almost finished up with college, so
hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. What's next for you in your career? What are you looking for next? You're looking for grad school, and then I got one more question after that.
Cool. Yeah. So this summer I have a position lined up with Microsoft for a security engineer position.
Awesome.
What am I going to be doing? We're going to find out later. I think it's either going to be like exploit development, like secure code practices, stuff like that, or infrastructure security. So basically, I'm gonna learn a lot, right?
Yeah.
From there, I don't know. It's wherever the wind takes me, right?
Yeah.
I think I might end up taking kind of a break on things after the Microsoft internship to really get down and put like 40 hours a week to just study whatever I want.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, right? Like being involved in all this. I mean, I've been connected with so many cool people. We've gone to go to trips to, DOE and all that sort of things. But eventually, you're like, dang, I don't got any more time in my week.
Yeah.
I need to open up some time.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I need to do. Take a little semester, study off, get my OACP, maybe my OSED. Really like sit down and like catch up on all the learning I haven't been able to do.
Yeah, focus down on some certs and kind of, cyber is such a broad field. And you mentioned earlier, you're wearing so many different hats, you kind of want to find which one you want to wear for the long run, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, because, the career is what you make it. So I think that's great to take a step back and see what you want to do. My last question would be, I'm asking this in all the pods now, what is one piece of advice or like knowledge that you can give to any cyber clinic members listening to this to either help them either personally or in their career or in cyber, just whatever, just general knowledge.
And if you're questioning if you should start something, start it. That simple as that. If there's a project that you want to start, be like, I don't know if I'm gonna know enough about it, start it. All right, you're gonna find someone that's gonna help you, and if not, you're gonna hit a roadblock, and you're gonna probably Google it regardless, right? You're gonna eventually hit issues. You're gonna fix it at some point. So why not start earlier? So yeah.
Cool, man. That's awesome. I 100% agree. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Angel. We appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in to Cyber Clinic Central. We'll catch you on the next episode.